Hello and welcome to the Sana Psychological Podcast, your safe space for connection, healing, and growth. Each episode, our experienced clinicians and special guests will share strategies, stories, and resources to support your unique path to well-being. Because at Sana, your mental health matters. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Sana Psychological Podcast. I'm Paige Abbott, your host for today. In this episode, I'm going to talk about alcohol consumption and drinking. We'll talk a little bit about why historically people drink, why currently people drink, and also some of the impacts of alcohol. It's interesting that with all of our podcast episodes to date, they've been done in one take, no do-overs, very mild edits. We just really want to view it as a conversation, which we don't get the chance to go back and do over. Interestingly, though, I was taping this particular episode, and as it was going, it just wasn't flowing. And I was realizing it just wasn't feeling quite right in how it was being presented. And I think part of that was it felt like it was coming across as an anti-alcohol campaign, which to a certain extent, maybe it is. The reality is that when we look at the facts of what alcohol does to our bodies, our brains, all different aspects of our health, from our skin to hydration to our immune system, none of it's really positive. So it was difficult to actually set up this episode in a way that comes across as unbiased and neutral. And I guess that's what I would say is I don't think it is unbiased or neutral. I've been an addiction therapist for over 15 years, and I've just seen so much harm come from substances, particularly alcohol, that it's hard to filter that out and sit in a place of objective neutrality when it comes to it. So I guess that's a bit of a disclaimer at the beginning that this isn't meant to be a totally neutral, objective episode. It is meant to provide more factual information about why alcohol is so dominant in our culture, but also have you looking at some of the impacts of alcohol as well on what it does to our bodies and our minds. And if this information is uncomfortable for you, if it's new for you, maybe that's something to pause and think about and look at. Maybe it's time to look at your own knowledge about alcohol and what it does to people, what it might be doing to yourself, and just start to take an honest exploration into your satisfaction level with your relationship with alcohol. For myself, I actually journeyed into not drinking close to, I'm not even sure now, probably 13 or so years ago. It just was not suiting my body. And so we can have a lot of different reasons for progressing into not drinking or changing our relationship with alcohol. And we'll talk more about that in our next episode, which is all about not drinking. But for today, we're talking all about drinking and alcohol consumption. And alcohol consumption is strongly rooted in our world and in our culture. Dating back for hundreds of years, it was a source of hydration and sustenance for people. Obviously, how it was made and what it consisted of is quite different than what that looks like today. And so it's hard to compare what was being consumed, back in, a long time ago compared to what's being consumed today. But nevertheless, there has been this thread of alcohol being there to not only provide like sustenance and hydration, but it's strongly linked to our social culture, party culture, events, and it feels like it's strongly connected to a sense of connection. And I know that for a lot of people that I talk to about their relationship with alcohol, some of the main reasons that people engage with alcohol One is it's just there. So most people don't even really think about it. They just pick up that first drink because it happens to be there, whether that's at a family gathering, a social event with friends, a party. It's just there from a pretty early time in people's lives. And because it's happening so early, we don't really have that critical thinking to wonder, what is this substance that I'm putting in myself? We just know that when we ingest it, we feel different, we feel a certain way. And for a lot of people, that's quite appealing. That can be a second reason that people consume alcohol is how it feels. So a lot of people use alcohol to bring about that sense of relaxation. For a lot of people, it's strongly associated with a sense of fun and celebration. And there's a strong relationship there that's hard to ignore and can be very enticing. Also, people do consume alcohol socially. Like, I would say that's one of the biggest things that I hear all the time. And for people who are considering changing their relationship with alcohol, one of the biggest challenges is, what am I going to do if I go to a social event, a work function, a party, a family gathering, a dinner with my partner, and I'm not consuming alcohol? When people look at their lives, sometimes it can be quite shocking how much alcohol is entrenched in all of these different aspects of events, having fun. Even people who are doing sporting events and hobbies, they notice that it's directly connected with drinking. People playing online video games with consuming alcohol at the same time, going out to play golf or hockey and drinking during or drinking after. It can become so enmeshed with different parts of these activities that it's easy to not really think about what we're doing and what we're consuming. Once people do start thinking a little bit more about what they're doing and what they're consuming, sometimes that can send people to explore a bit more the impact of alcohol. And it's interesting that alcohol does much more to different systems of our body than we realize. And many people are quite surprised by the multifaceted impact that it can have. So, alcohol is a bit more unusual if we are just talking about the impact physiologically for a few minutes. It's unusual because it doesn't require much digestion. So, once consumed, alcohol begins to enter our bloodstream quite quickly. Some absorption occurs in the stomach, but most alcohol is absorbed through the small intestine. And from there, it travels throughout the body, including to our brain. So within minutes, alcohol begins affecting our neurotransmitters, which are the chemical messengers that allow our brain cells to communicate with each other and with other parts of our body. Alcohol quickly increases the activity of a calming neurotransmitter called GABA, while reducing the activity of glutamate, which normally promotes more alertness and brain activity. So the results of that twofold increase in GABA, decrease in glutamate, is that familiar feeling of relaxation, reduced inhibition, slower reaction times, and impaired judgment that comes with consumption of alcohol. As we continue to drink alcohol at one sitting or one event and our blood alcohol levels continue to rise, we start to then see impacts on things like coordination, memory, decision making, and balance. Meanwhile, the liver begins the important task of breaking down alcohol, and the liver can only process a limited amount at a time, which is why drinking faster than the liver can metabolize alcohol leads to a sense of intoxication. Obviously, when we're intoxicated to a certain extent, that's where people may lose some of those pleasurable feelings of alcohol. People may even enter a brownout or a blackout state where they're unable to form memories and therefore the next day and in the future don't have any real memories or very patchy memories of what might have happened during that drinking occasion. The next day, as our body is trying to recover, can also feel pretty physically uncomfortable for people. And this is because alcohol is linked to our digestive health, our hydration, our immune system functioning. And so all of these effects are felt even after one episode of drinking, whether it was heavy or light. And so drinking can have an effect on our body and our functioning for multiple days after even just one or two drinks. And a lot of people who are minimal consumers may start to notice this impact that, hey, I only drink like once or twice a week, but I notice that now the impact of this is actually taking up half of my week because it takes the body that time to repair and recover. And obviously, the more chronic and more regular alcohol is, the more those impacts can be exaggerated, right? We start to see more and more impact that's lasting longer, and people may not have much time out of that alcohol effect loop. And so they really start to notice the impact on things like digestive health. So the irritation of alcohol in the lining of our stomach can lead to symptoms like acid reflux, heartburn, bloating, nausea, indigestion. It can disrupt the balance of bacteria living in the gut. So this can lead to just not feeling overall well, can lead to vitamin deficiencies because our body is less able to absorb certain nutrients. And these are the impacts that you may not notice after just one episode of drinking, but with chronic alcohol use, you may start to notice some of these effects. And it's easy to blame other things. You might think it's contributed by other health conditions or something that you ate that night. But if you are having symptoms of any physical health things that are happening, I would encourage you to very closely examine your relationship with alcohol and maybe even do an experiment to shift your relationship with alcohol for a period of time. Just see what happens. A lot of people do notice that after 3 to 6 months of reduced and especially no consumption, that some of these impacts start to shift. And it's quite surprising to people how much even that episodic consumption of alcohol was impacting them. Alcohol also does affect our immune system. So people are more likely to notice they feel run down after periods of heavy drinking, but also notice that they're more susceptible to getting sick more regularly. So even people who are normally pretty immune to colds, flus, viruses like that may notice that with more chronic alcohol use over time, that they're starting to feel that they just get every virus that comes their way, or they last longer. It's harder to heal because even after a single episode of drinking, this can temporarily reduce our body's ability to fight infections. So with chronic heavy alcohol use, the effects become more significant. Research has shown increased susceptibility to respiratory infections, slower healing, and greater overall immune dysfunction. Alcohol also contributes to inflammation throughout the body. So while it may create a temporary feeling of relaxation, chronic drinking, and that can be even one episode of drinking per week, can actually increase physiological stress and inflammatory responses over time. I would say the same thing is true for mental health symptoms like depression and anxiety. A lot of people find initially when they are starting to drink that alcohol actually helps reduce some of these symptoms. And so that can lead to more regular consumption of alcohol because it feels like a treatment. It feels like medicine that's helping. But over time, it starts to tip over into the symptoms that alcohol seemed to be helping with. It's now actually contributing to, because longer term and more regular alcohol consumption can definitely lead to an increased feeling of anxiety, especially as people are going through those intoxication and withdrawal cycles. And same thing with depression. People can end up feeling at a more chronic low point with their mood just because of the way the chemical is impacting their brain and other parts of their health, including that gut health, that our gut is strongly linked to our mood. A lot of neurotransmitter activity is actually actually generated and happens in our stomach. And so anything that interferes with that is also going to interfere with our mood. Alcohol also impacts even things like skin health. So, this alcohol leads to dehydration. So, as a result, skin may appear drier, duller, less elastic. People may also notice some puffiness, especially around the eyes and in the face after drinking. And alcohol also dilates our blood vessels. So, that may worsen redness in the face or on the nose. And again, this can be short term effects after just one episode of drinking, even just a couple of drinks. Or if there's more regular drinking happening, these effects may not be healing as much in between. And so they become more chronic symptoms as well. And I know I'm speaking generally when I'm saying heavier drinking or more regular drinking. And I'm purposely being a bit vague because the reality is that how alcohol is going to affect the person does depend on the person. Everyone's body, everyone's processing, everyone's physiology is different. But the reality is that even a person having one drink is going to notice some of these effects. These things are happening in the body. These systems, digestion, dehydration, inflammation, are all being impacted. We just may not notice if the drinking is less often and to a smaller extent, but these things are still occurring, and everyone's different in their tolerance level. Some people are just not okay with any degree of inflammation or skin impact, mood impact, sleep impact, whereas others are tolerating a lot more of that before they start to look at their relationship with alcohol and their consumption of it. So I don't really adhere to the healthy drinking guidelines that are out there. If you want to follow those for a guide for yourself, go ahead. But what I'm meaning is that everyone's a bit different in their comfort level. And I've had people who are just not okay with how it feels to consume one drink once a week, whereas others start to notice that there's a problem when they're consuming 8 drinks every day of the week. So again, everyone's different in their perspective, in their experience. And at the end of the day, if something's not feeling okay for you, that's an important time to look at that. Alcohol can also lead to weight gain. So that's something that can also come up for people. Poor sleep can be another thing that's impacted, and also poor nutritional choices because, again, our rational mind functioning is lowered when we're consuming alcohol. And so we tend not to be as thoughtful about our choices and going more for the things that create that instant gratification and feel like they're more satisfying. So that can lead people to either not eat and just consume alcohol or be attracted more to unhealthy foods that are more sugary or more fatty or salty because that's what they're craving. So some of the more immediate impacts that people notice when they're changing their relationship with alcohol is improved sleep, as well as a change in their body and appearance. And it's good that these things happen relatively quickly when people change their relationship with alcohol, because that can definitely be really motivating to keep them going in the process. Alcohol can definitely become a coping mechanism as well. And as I said before, a lot of the times the symptoms that alcohol is initially there to treat may end up actually factoring into creating some of those symptoms. If alcohol is a coping mechanism for you, if you use it to de-stress, unwind, relax, also if you use it to have fun, all of these things do increase our risk for a more problematic relationship with alcohol. And I'm glad that you're listening to this episode because I'm thinking that that means you're a bit curious about the impact of alcohol, what people's relationship with alcohol looks like, and maybe you're starting to consider learning a bit more for yourself and or maybe looking at making some changes for yourself. And if so, that's great. There's never a wrong time or a bad time to start to think about what we might want to do differently for ourselves. And often that process does start with a bit more information gathering monitoring, learning more about what's happening. I find that the Reframe app is a really good resource. They have a free social media account where they have regular information about the physiological impact of alcohol. And also This Naked Mind with Annie Grace. Those are two resources that client after client over the years have really appreciated in learning more about the impact of alcohol on the mind and in the body. And again, that just informs decision making and choices about how you want to move forward with this. So there's certainly nothing bad or wrong about consuming alcohol. It is important to realize that there are risks with it, and it's important to consider what might be happening for you and if you're okay with the impact of alcohol. If you're not, and it's starting to feel worrisome or concerning, or you have some symptoms that you're not liking, then that's a good clue and cue to start to look at that relationship and see if you want to make some changes. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to abstain from alcohol for the rest of your life, but there may be some short-term experimentation to just see what that offers your body, your mood, and your overall health. Thank you so much for listening. Next time, join me to hear more about the journey into sobriety and reducing drinking. That's also something I've seen so many people do over the years, and I'm excited to just share little tidbits of wisdom that they've shared with me that I'm happy to pass along if you're at that point, or if you're already at the point where you're changing your relationship with alcohol. Thanks so much for joining us. Can't wait to talk to you next time. Thank you for listening to the Sana Psychological Podcast. We're glad you joined us today. For more resources, free tools, or to book a session with our team, visit sanapsychological.com. Your mental health is our priority. Until next time, be gentle with yourself and take good care.